All right, so what I read in December. I'm going to keep doing these monthly recaps just because I think it's fun to go back and think about what I read in the last month. So I've got actually a pretty small list this time, but it's because these are some big books. So I have 3 graphic novels and 3 novels. I didn't intentionally do that, it's just kind of how it worked out. The first book I actually read for December was a reread, and it was The Sandman Omnibus, Volume 1. I mean, look at that thing. It took me a while to read it. I've read it before, loved this book. Absolutely one of the best graphic novels of all time. This is a beautiful edition. And it's because I read the Lock and Key Sandman crossover, and I wanted to read The Sandman again. Beautiful book, beautiful stories. Really happy to have finished it again. I love when you reread something and you feel like you get more out of it. Got Volume 2 and Volume 3. I'll probably reread those again as well. But the next book that I read was actually a novel. And I'm going through and reading all of Cormac McCarthy's books in publication order, and I made it to Suttree. Yeah, this was by far my favorite book I read all year long. This is one of the greatest books I've ever read. I mean, I can't think of anything better than this. This might be my favorite book of all time, and I'm not just exaggerating because I just read it. I mean, this book really spoke to me personally. I think it's like semi-autobiographical about McCarthy. It's basically about a guy, Suttree, who comes from a wealthy family who just leaves it all behind to go be a fisherman on a river and just live a simple life. And that just really speaks to me. I am a little bit of the black sheep of my family as well. I don't really follow the traditional paths most people. I've always just been more concerned about being free and being happy and just doing what I want to do, and I guess living the American dream. Not a huge book, but McCarthy's writing is so intense. I really slowed down and took my time and read this slowly and really enjoyed it. Man, it's worth it. It was so good, I honestly want to pick it right back up and reread it, and I probably will. That's how much I loved it. A lot of people smarter than me talk about this book on the internet. This book made me laugh. I mean, what book really makes you laugh when you're reading it? This book made me like sad. It definitely made me shed a tear. It made me laugh. It made me sweat. It's like a roller coaster of emotions. And yeah. It was so good, actually, that the next book I read was McCarthy's next novel in publication order, Blood Meridian. I'd heard so much about this. This is a very infamous novel for being so brutal, and it was. And I really enjoyed it. Not quite as much as Suttree, but I think this one would really benefit from a reread. Because I think if I read this again, and I probably will very soon, maybe even like right now, I think if I read it again, I will get so much more out of it because it's a little bit hard to follow. Suttree was a little easier to follow because it's not so much about, the strange writing. It has more of a plot of just a guy doing his thing. Whereas this is like, it's like reading the Bible. This thing is it's hard to follow. It's intense. There's a lot of words I didn't even know. There's a lot of Spanish, so I'm learning Spanish, but I'm not great at it. And I didn't look up any of the translations. I just read it and tried to sort of understand. Again, there's a lot of people on the internet, way smarter than me, that have talked about this book for hours and hours. But I finally read it. I really enjoyed it, but it'll definitely benefit from a reread. So I got the Berserk figure in the mail, and I did a review on it. Really enjoyed it. Look, I held it backwards because it's a manga. Yeah, you read it backwards. Berserk, Volume 1. I went ahead and reread this. This was a very fast read. You can read these really fast. Loved it. This is like my third or fourth time reading Berserk. So, nothing new here. Still loved it just as much as ever. Guts is one of my favorite characters of all time. This is definitely my favorite manga of all time. And these are absolutely beautiful deluxe editions. I'm afraid to even open up the book. I can't show anything because it's pretty out there. But since it was such a fast read, I actually went ahead and read Volume 2 as well. Again, I held it backwards. Yeah, so you read it from right to left instead of from left to right if you've never read Japanese stories before. Beautiful. It's really starting to pick up. I mean, I immediately want to read Volume 3 because Volume 3 is where a lot of things really start to happen. I think I have the first 9 of these deluxes, and there's 14 in total, so I'm just kind of picking them up slowly here and there. But the last book that I read for December 2023, I've been reading Joe Hill. I've been reading all of his books in publication order as well. And I knew I wanted to save this for around Christmas time because this is a novel that takes place in a fictional place called Christmas Land, kind of. I thought. Not really. It was fine reading it during Christmas. It was, for sure. But you don't have to. This actually takes place during the summertime. So if you haven't read it, it's just about a man who drives a car with the license plate Nosferatu, because he's basically like a vampire. He feeds on children in a way. It's unique. He takes them to a place of his own imagining called Christmas Land. This, it was good. It was big, but I blazed through it. I read it so fast because it just read in that sort of way. I don't think I loved this one quite as much as some of Joe Hill's other works, but I did really enjoy it. I think when you have a book this big, a lot of the time the first half of the book is really good, and then the middle to the end can sort of drag. Maybe just because the book's so big and you're just sort of on a lull. But overall, I did really enjoy it. And yeah, I feel like I had a great month reading in December. And I've already started reading books for January. So, see you then.